Okay, let's look at the chapter from Urey on separating the people from the problem. I think it has Urey and Fisher have a lot of good points here. But it also means separating ourselves from the problem, not just our counterpart, because often our own emotions are the biggest obstacles to a win-win, because we have a very natural human reaction to get our back up if somebody is being aggressive with us or screaming at us or accusing us. And we have to fight the temptation to respond with the same kind of tactics. And it may be a tactic. So the best thing to do, if we can, is to try to adopt a philosophical attitude with an aggressive opponent, an angry opponent. But we have to continue to watch out for our own interests. Now, this is not that easy. I understand that. Let's take a look at the stolen boots example, which was in our first reading assignment. Who was in the right? Well, you could argue either one was in the right, the miner and the foreman, but they both allowed their emotions to, make them not budge 1 inch. And what happened? You have a very expensive strike for the price of a pair of boots. So $20 or $30, or even if the boots were $100, it's just not worth it to insist on being in the right. Always. Here's another example. This happened in Alaska with a new Nordstrom's. What Nordstrom's had done is they bought a shopping area with many little stores, and of course they took all those stores out. One of them had been a tire store. And then they built Nordstrom over that footprint. Well, about a year later, some old prospector, I say old in the sense that, he's an old guy like me, went out to the counter, customer service counter at Nordstrom's, banged on the counter, holding a tire in his arm and complaining that the tire didn't live up to its warranty. Now, the person at Nordstrom agreed with the customer without question and gave him a refund on that tire because the customer had the sales receipt. But, of course, my point is Nordstrom doesn't sell tires. It would have been easy for them to say, sir, you bought this from a store that has been demolished. You're standing in a department store now, a high-fashion department store. But they didn't. For the sake of customer relations, they refunded that old prospector for an item that they did not even buy from Nordstrom's. So that gives you an idea of this philosophical point of view. Now, you could not do this with a major concession, but they did it with a smaller concession, and hopefully that prospector became, a customer. When we deal with an angry counterpart in a negotiation, Fisher and Urey suggest, this is a good quote, deal with the people problems directly. Don't try to solve them with substantive concessions. And I think trying to solve them with concessions is a natural reaction. Now, the reason we don't want to do that is because anger can be feigned. A person can be pretending to be angry. It can be a negotiating tactic. I have seen it. I have been on the other side of I've been the recipient of that. And when somebody is angry with us, we're not comfortable. Most of us are not comfortable with that, especially if somebody is accusative and they're accusing us of something that we're guiltless of. So we feel wronged, and we want to correct the error. We want peace. We want harmony. And we want to show our opponent that he or she is mistaken about us, that we're really good human beings and we're easy to get along with. So what do? We concede. And that may be exactly what our opponent is counting on. When we do confront anger, Fisher and Urey suggest we try to see it from their point of view. I couldn't agree more. We want to find out if their anger is justified. and we want to be empathetic toward it, and we have to acknowledge it. If, for example, a customer is complaining about previous treatment from your company, and all of that is true, well, you're in a poor position trying to convince him that his experience is wrong. Of course it's true, but you have to show them that things have changed now. New organization, new management, etc., etc. New installation department, new service department, new accounting department. The mistakes of the past are of the past. So you try your best. So you understand with your customer, but it's not the same as agreeing with your customer. Now, this is a time when you might want to reach for your objective criterion to counter the accusation. But if your opponent remains emotional, we have to get him or her to talk about their emotions. And we have to talk about our own emotions as well. So as it may sound a little funny, but we have to become like a couples counselor, at least for a few minutes, to get that out of our way so we can both get back to seeking a win-win solution hand in hand together. That's our goal, and almost all of the negotiations will be in. Now, Fisher and Ury talk about 3 big problems in communication. I want to comment on them. I put their comments in quotes. You may not be talking to your counterpart. What they're referring to here is you're not talking to somebody, you're talking past somebody. I see this in debates. I love debates. I go on Intelligence Squared, which is a great website, and I buy their debates. They're really cheap, like $10 for the DVD, and you have this hour debate between experts. And sometimes the experts recognize that the person they're debating with is not going to change their mind for anything. So in effect, they're talking to the audience. Now, this could happen in a negotiation if your management is with you and you're trying to show off for your manager, trying to show your manager how tough you are, what a tough negotiator you are, rather than getting the other side to be your partner. So this does happen. He or she may not be listening, Fisher and Ury tell us, and of course you may not be listening either. That's one of the big problems in a negotiation. We're not listening when the other guy is talking. We're thinking about what we're going to say. We're thinking about how we're going to counter point 1, and now he's talking point 2 and point 3 and point 4, and we're not listening. I think we have to, I don't know if this is a term or not. You've heard of active listening. When I say active talking, I mean that if you say something and it looks like it's gone in one ear and out the other, you've got to call your opponent on this and say something like, don't you agree that this would serve your organization well? Get him, he may be daydreaming. He may be thinking, he may be like you. He may be not active listening, but thinking about what he's going to say next. And so he's kind of nodding his head. This happens, incidentally, in job interviews all the time. If you interview for a job at 2:30 in the afternoon, that HR person or that manager may have been through 3 or 4 interviews already. They're brain dead. Whatever you say is going through one ear and out the other, and you have to bring them out of it by active talking, by getting them to agree that what you're saying possibly makes a lot of sense. Now, it could be that your counterpart is listening, but they're misinterpreting you. This happens frequently in cross-cultural negotiations, or really in cross-cultural conversations of any kind. But people have different frames of reference, and we may use a phrase that is a colloquialism here in America that makes 0 sense to somebody from Malaysia. So we have to be aware of the different frames of reference. I remember one of my students is a LAPD officer, and when he first got out of the academy, he's in his uniform. He wants to do good. He's the kind of guy that really wants to do good and serve the community. And he was given a part of Los Angeles that has a very high immigrant population from Central America. And when they see the uniform, they think of the police. They have a totally different frame of reference. They think of the police in Ecuador and San Salvador, where they can be rather corrupt. They can be as bad as the drug cartels, and so they live in fear of the police. And he had to realize, well, they had a different frame of reference towards the police that many of us do. So we have to be aware of that. That's why it's good to ask for feedback. This is another example of active talking. You want to make sure that they understand your proposition, your position, your suggestion for a solution. And then you have to get them to talk about it and explain it in their own way. Fisher and Ury suggest that we should sit on the same side of the table with our counterpart. Now, I know what they're getting at here, and I agree, but I think there could be some drawbacks. Just picture this. If you're on the same side, literally on the same side of the table with the person you're negotiating with, you have a more difficult time reading their faces, reading their body language. And I ask you, if you were on a dinner date with somebody, would you be more comfortable sitting across from your date or sitting side by side? I think many of us might be more comfortable sitting across the table because there again, we can read the faces, we can see the body language. Now, in a negotiation, if you are sitting side by side with somebody, you may want to shield your information. Your laptop is open, your spreadsheet, whatever it is. Why sit side by side with somebody if you're going to lean forward and cover all of your precious documentation? I think sitting side by side can work in a negotiation. I think it should be done later rather than sooner, especially if your counterpart is of the opposite gender. This is something you don't want to spring on somebody. But I think when you are brainstorming a solution and you are both looking in the same direction at a whiteboard, for example, where a facilitator is scribbling down all the spaghetti on the wall that we're throwing, or you're looking at a computer screen, or when you have objective criteria. I'll give you an example. 6 months ago, my wife informed me that she wanted a new car, and of all things, she wanted a Lexus. So, of course, I said, no, absolutely not. No way. You can forget it. It's not happening. Well, I lost that negotiation. The next thing I know, I'm sitting across the table from a Lexus sales guy in the Lexus dealer, and we're arm wrestling over price. And finally, I wanted to do the win-win thing. And finally, I said, look, you got to help me. Let's work with this together. And I moved over on his side of the table and spread out my printout of all of the other Lexus dealers within, 100 miles. I had no intention of going to these dealers. I was using this as objective criterion to get him to recognize he was asking too much and to lower his price and to put the fear of God in him that I may go somewhere else. And it did help. I mean, he was good. He would point out, well, this dealer here doesn't have certified Lexus and we do, so we're not comparing apples to apples. But I called him on that. I said, well, wait a minute. You've been telling me for the last half an hour how trouble-free these cars are. Why do I worry? If they're that trouble-free, I'm not that interested in a certified car. I didn't mean that. I was bluffing. Believe me, I wanted a certified car. But it kind of took him off his game a little bit and made him look at the prices, and that's what I wanted. So I think sitting side by side can work. And in a way, when you do something like this, you're not really separating the people from the problem because there was no animosity between us. He was a nice guy salesman, I was a nice guy customer. What I was doing by bringing out that objective criterion was separating the problem from the people. And we're both staring at it, and it did seem to work. Okay, that's it for Chapter 1. Chapter 5, using objective criterion, I also touch on when we debrief the used car sales. So I think we're caught up here. All right, thanks so much. Bye-bye.